Okay, we're going to do the first flight of this Osprey right here, and now if you need to rebind your receiver, make sure you rebind your receiver so that when you fire up the ship that these nacelles don't go to some default location. So you want to make sure after you set the nacelles up that you go ahead and rebind with the conversion switch all the way in helicopter mode. Then when you fire it up, they won't jump around on you. I'm going to turn on my transmitter, and I'm going to make sure all my switches are forward like I like to do. I'll make sure I'm in helicopter mode, and I'm going to turn my gyro into heading hold mode. And then I'm going to plug in the ship. And I'm going to so we want to double check that the gyro lights go solid red and the controller light goes solid green, and that means everything's good and your speed controls have initiated. I'm going to turn back into rate mode. I'm going to plug up my other battery. I've got both batteries plugged in now. I'm going to switch to normal mode, stunt 1 mode, which will make my throttles activate. I'm going to let them come up to speed. Then as they get up to speed, I'm going to switch my gyro into hold mode. And I should be able to pretty easily level the aircraft. Then I'm going to just pick the aircraft off the ground. Now I'm going to double check tracking here. Pick it up, eye height. Yeah, and that tracking's right on. So I'm going to go ahead and keep the ship below head height for a battery. And just make sure that there's no bugs. And something happens, we can check our throttle hold switch. Go ahead and hit your throttle hold switch, and that should turn the throttles off. But if you flick it back on, your throttles will come up quickly. That's working correctly. It's pretty windy out today. This ship's still real stable. I'll kind of give it a little bit of a roll input there and see if I get any oscillations and roll. Looks like that's pretty good. Get a pitch input. That's pretty good. No oscillations in pitch. Give it a yaw input and no oscillations in yaw. So looks like those gyro gain settings are right on. I just give it some high collective pitch, not full collective pitch, but some high collective pitch pushes. You can see how briskly it climbs. You want that. You want it to climb briskly. That means you got your collective pitch set up close to correct. And we'll go over the pitch governor setup in a couple videos. So if you put this helicopter together and follow these video instructions closely, or follow the manual closely, you'll have a really reliable aircraft. I've built about 10 of them now for different people and haven't had any problems with the build. But if you don't follow the instructions closely, if you make just one mistake, that's all it takes. because this aircraft relies on a lot of things to make it fly. That it relies on a lot of things working correctly to make it fly. And if just one of them isn't working correctly, it won't fly. So that's why you have to be extra meticulous about assembling this aircraft. And take your time, like, you know, I'm going to go ahead and burn this whole battery close to the ground, just to make sure no bugs show up. Also make sure that, you know, your batteries are fully charged. More than one occasion had one battery that was charged and the other one wasn't, and gone around and flown it. You can get away with it, but when the first battery runs down, the good battery runs down, the rotors lose RPM very rapidly. Just kind of docking it around here, kind of messing with it. You can see in the video the splice plate between the profile front fuselage and profile aft fuselage, how we don't use the center holes on that splice plate, and we use the holes that are up against the side, and then the splice plate flanges so it overlaps. And that helps stiffen up the profile tail, and it's opposite. Now the ICE 50s have a data logger in it, and we'll be able to download that information and take a look at it. And when we get out of the backyard and start flying out at the field, we'll do some high power climbs, and we'll be able to check the maximum current, and then we'll use that information to adjust the pitch governor. Now this ship will fly just like a model helicopter. If you don't move the nacelles, it'll just fly very similar to a model helicopter. If you do tweak the nacelles forward, the ship's gonna move forward without any lean, and it'll fly just like the model helicopter, except you won't have to push the nose down to keep it moving. And it's pretty brisk. It gets moving pretty quick, so you really wouldn't want to do it in a confined area. batteries are pretty old, so that's a full battery for the first flight of this V-22 Osprey. Turn everything off and unplug the batteries. A day like today, today's probably in the 80s, a hover, this stuff just gets warm. The speed controls are actually not even warm, and the motor's just warm to a little, yeah, it's warm. The motor's warm, the speed controls are really not warm at all. I always like to just, after every flight, kind of just wiggle things. I do this on any helicopter and just check for any looseness. Anything in the control system getting loose. And I always recommend checking for end play in the main shaft, because as I mentioned before, that the V-22 really doesn't like that. And this one's got a little, so I must not have gotten that set screw fully seated on that main shaft. And I'll have to fix that collar on this main shaft. But everything else is nice and tight. And that's the first flight of this V-22 Osprey. Okay, honey.